They had prepared for invasion. They had trained for battle. They had accepted death, but nothing prepared them for the moment when speed itself became the enemy. At first, they heard rumors. Then they heard engines. Then, they heard nothing at all. Positions vanished overnight. Front lines stopped making sense. And one name began to follow them through every retreat. Patton. This is not the story of a hero. This is the story of fear, told by the men who stood on the other side. For German soldiers, the war had rules. Lines were drawn, orders were issued, battles were planned. Even chaos had structure. They believed discipline could survive anything. They believed experience would protect them. But war does not always break men with force. Sometimes, it breaks them with pace. Before Patton arrived, something strange happened. Units reported contact that made no sense. American forces appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again somewhere else. German officers blamed errors, bad intelligence, poor coordination, but the reports kept coming. One soldier later wrote, "It felt like the ground itself was moving." War depends on maps, and then the maps stopped helping. Routes once considered safe became traps. Rear positions became front lines overnight. Patton did not push forward evenly. He sliced through assumptions. One officer admitted, "We were planning for yesterday's war, and Patton was already fighting tomorrow's." The most dangerous fear is the fear you cannot see. German soldiers began retreating before contact was made, not because they were cowards, but because they no longer trusted distance. One infantryman recalled, "If we waited, he would be behind us. If we moved, he would already be there." Patton's reputation arrived faster than his tanks. Fear does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Men stopped writing letters, stopped joking, stopped sleeping. Cigarettes burned untouched. One diary entry read, "Night offers no rest anymore." The idea of a rear line had vanished. German officers felt trapped. They were trained to calculate risk. Patton removed calculation. Delay meant encirclement. Advance meant exposure. Defense meant collapse. One officer later said, against him, every choice felt wrong. Command became survival. There is a moment in every war when belief breaks. For many German units, that moment came quietly. No announcement, no collapse, just the realization that the enemy would not slow down. That realization was devastating. This was not defeat, but it was the end of control. From this point forward, German soldiers were no longer shaping the war. They were chasing it, and it was moving too fast. Patton understood something ancient. Speed breaks armies. Before bullets do, German units did not collapse all at once. They thinned, they stretched, they disappeared. One soldier wrote, "We were always arriving too late." Momentum had replaced strategy. Radio messages contradicted each other. Orders arrived outdated. Units fought battles that no longer mattered. One veteran recalled, "We didn't know if we were advancing or retreating." Confusion became constant. Where Patton moved, night offered no protection. Engines echoed in darkness. German soldiers slept in minutes, not hours. One diary entry read, "The darkness belongs to him now." Fatigue became a weapon, face to face with certainty. Some German soldiers encountered Patton as prisoners. They expected hatred. Instead, they encountered certainty. One recalled, "He spoke like the war was already over." That confidence was terrifying, because it felt final. Over time, fear changed. It became recognition. German veterans later admitted, "He never hesitated." They did not admire cruelty. They admired decisiveness, and that made the fear deeper. After the war, The war ended, cities rebuilt, uniforms disappeared, but memory remained. Veterans gathered years later. When Patton's name was spoken, conversations slowed, not with anger, with silence. What they remembered, they did not remember his face. They remembered the feeling, the pressure, the speed, the sense of being hunted. One veteran said simply, "Some enemies stay with you. Wars end with signatures, but fear does not. It waits, it echoes." For the enemy, Patton was not just a general. He was momentum, he was inevitability, and long after the war ended, that feeling remained. This was not the story of victory. This was the story of what it felt like to stand on the other side of history. Welcome to Echoes of the Enemy. The war did not end in their minds. The day it ended on paper. For many German soldiers, silence was louder than gunfire, because silence gave memory space to speak, and memory never forgot speed. Candle the return home. They returned to towns that no longer felt familiar. Houses stood, streets existed, but something inside them remained on the battlefield. One veteran later wrote, "Home was quiet, but my thoughts were still moving." Patton had trained them to expect movement. And now, stillness felt unnatural. Brain memory without uniforms, without orders, without enemies in sight. The mind replayed moments endlessly. The sudden retreats, the engines at night, the feeling of being outpaced. They did not dream of explosions. They dreamed of arrival too late. Cigarette the thing they could not explain. Families asked questions. What was the war like? Were you afraid? Most answered vaguely. How do you explain fear? That does not come from violence, but from inevitability. One veteran admitted decades later, "We were not afraid of dying. We were afraid of being overtaken." Crossed swords speed as trauma. Modern psychology would later give it a name. But back then, they only felt it. The trauma was not chaos. It was pace. The inability to slow events down. The inability to catch up. Patton had turned time into a weapon. Brick comparison with other enemies. German veterans spoke of many enemies. Some were brutal, some were cautious, some were predictable. Patton was none of these. One soldier said, "Others fought battles. He fought the clock." That difference stayed with them. Dove respect that arrived too late. Years later, as age softened memory, something unexpected emerged. Acknowledgement, not admiration, not forgiveness, understanding. Patton had not fought emotionally. He had fought decisively, and decisiveness leaves scars. New moon when his name appeared again. Sometimes it appeared in books, sometimes in documentaries, sometimes in conversations. Each time, the reaction was the same. A pause, a quiet recognition. One veteran whispered, "Yes, him." No explanation followed. None was needed. Candle the enemy becomes a symbol. Over time, Patton stopped being remembered as a man. He became an idea, the idea that momentum cannot be stopped. That hesitation is fatal, that speed punishes doubt, and ideas are harder to defeat than armies. Fire the true end of the story. This was never about tanks, or strategy, or victory. It was about how war feels. When control is removed, when the enemy does not wait, when tomorrow arrives too early. For those who faced him, Patton was not hatred, he was pressure, a pressure that followed them long after the war had ended. And pressure leaves echoes. War ends when weapons fall silent. But memory does not obey treaties. It waits, it returns, it whispers names. And for the enemy, one name never truly faded. Patton. This was not history. as written by winners. This was history, as remembered by those who stood against it. And this is where the story truly ends. Not on a battlefield, not with surrender, not with victory, but with memory. Because war does not leave everyone the same way. Some return home, some move on, and some carry the enemy with them. For those who faced Patton, the war did not end in 1945. It ended slowly, quietly, inside their thoughts. Because there are battles you survive, and then there are names you never forget. This was not the story of a general. This was the story of what it felt like to stand on the other side of momentum. Welcome to Echoes of the Enemy.